called Yellow Rose, a novel of the Texas Revolution. Carl R. Brush joins us, and he's one of the writers of this book. And boy, you think of the Texas Revolution. And after I had a conversation with him, he filled in the blanks. There was a lot that I didn't know. So I think you're all going to find this interesting. Carl, thanks for coming on. What made you decide to tackle this? Why did you write the book?
The inspiration or the impetus came from my co-author, Bob Stewart. He was born and raised in Texas, and he invited me to join him in co-authoring the book. And I said, wait a minute, Bob, I don't know much about the whole thing, except that it happened, and I am a Californian, and you're a Texan, and I don't know that I'm the right person for this job. And we had been corresponding online, and as authors often do these days, we looked at each other's manuscripts and had conversations on a variety of subjects. And he just said, well, I like your writing, and I think that we could collaborate and have a good time with this. So I went ahead, obviously, and we figured out a way of dividing up the tasks and shared the project. I had to learn an awful lot. He was born and raised in San Antonio, and so he grew up with this whole legend and history, and I knew virtually nothing, so I had a lot of research to do, but it was fun research. It's a very interesting event, pretty unique. Texas was a actual nation, a republic, before it became a state, and how it got there and what happened afterwards was just fascinating. So,
wow. So let me ask you this. Let me stop you there. It was a republic. It's funny because you keep hearing that mentioned about, hey, we're breaking away. But you're right. It was a republic before it was a state. It was a very different place from what I've read, and you know way more than me, of what it was like back in the day. So what happened? There was a series of battles, and it was led by somebody named Sam Houston, where they've got a huge statue of Sam Houston in Texas. In fact, several, and you can't miss it from one of the highways when you're going down toward Houston. And what was his impact on the Texas and the Texas Revolution?
He actually got involved through Andrew Jackson, who had visions of bringing Texas into the Union. That didn't happen for quite a while after Texas became a republic. It happened in 1845, and as I said, the revolution was in 1836, that one tumultuous year. And so he kind of chose Houston as the general. There was a constitutional convention before the battle, and he was instrumental in that, and they, wrote the document that established Texas as a nation. The United States was very young. The nearest state was, I think, Tennessee at the time. So that is the way it, got started. So they charged. He got himself an army together, and they charged in. He promised people land and wanted to make the whole population, as I said, a whole nation. And away they went, and they had a lot of reversals, and for a while it didn't look like they were going to do anything at all. But in the end, they established their republic in Santa Ana, but Houston was the military hero, and so he became the first president of the republic, and that's how he got involved.
Wow. So when you look at this and you were researching, what was the biggest surprise that you found when you researched the book Yellow Rose, a novel of the Texas Revolution? What surprised you the most?
I would have to say the story of the Alamo, which came about halfway through the battles, or through the to the whole tenure of the war, because I knew that the Alamo had been kind of a massacre, but I didn't realize that after the Alamo, Houston and his army had to do a very lengthy retreat all the way east across a couple of big rivers like the Colorado and the Brazos, and to evade Santa Anna's army. So I didn't know anything about that retreat, and I didn't know much about any of the battles. I thought it was had just been kind of a fait accompli, but it was a narrow thing. So I was, I was quite surprised that it was, the narrow victory that it was, and how close it came to being a complete debacle.
Yeah. So interesting. I love the Alamo. I got married in San Antonio, and the Alamo is featured on my wedding invitation. So,
no kidding.
Yes.
Me.
And I grew up in Philly, so I just fell in love with that whole idea of what Texas was and what happened, and touring it. And I would tell anyone listening, you get Carl's book and you go and you look at the Alamo, and you really get the real sense of what Texas was like. No question about it. And in this novel, and it is a novel, the novel mixes like legend with fact. I mean, that's what's so brilliant about this. So when you were writing it and you were doing this jointly with Bob, what was that process like for both of you?
Well, one of the reasons I like writing historical fiction is that you can, do a certain amount of history, but you can also embellish, and so it's the best of both worlds to me. And this particular incident was just made to order because there is not very much known about a lot of the people involved. So we were kind of free to invent a great deal. The Yellow Rose actually existed. The woman was a freed black from New York, and there was an entrepreneur who was trying to, or had in mind, building a resort on Galveston Bay. I don't know how they met or exactly what the process was there, but she signed a year's contract to go down and help with this project. And so she was a very light-skinned woman, and they called that was the term. A yellow rose was an attractive black woman who was very light in color, and so she went down there, and she was a yellow rose, and she got involved with the whole process of building this resort, and it was shortly before this revolution started. Now, we don't know historically how she was involved with Houston, or if she was involved at all. And nobody knows what happened to her after the revolution. She just fades away into history, and there's a lot of speculation, which is nice because I can speculate along with anybody else and and turn it into a plot. So we got going with that, and we decided that of course there had to be a good romance between Sam Houston and her. We don't, historically, nobody knows whether they ever even met, and the way we set it up was that I would write the chapters that involved the Yellow Rose, whose name was Emily West. Although if you go to San Antonio, you'll find her referred to as Emily Morgan, as sort of a slave thing, because the guy who was building this resort was named Morgan, so everybody called her after him, but her actual birth name was Emily West. I was writing the chapters that were from her point of view, and Bob was writing the chapters that were from Sam Houston's point of view. And so we went back and forth and, of course, traded manuscripts and criticized each other and had a few knockdown drag-outs here and there.
As any good writing pair would. I love it. Yeah. Wow. So interesting.
He was very adamant about this business of, her being Emily West, because since you've been around San Antonio, you might know that there's a Morgan Hotel.
Yes.
That was named after her.
Yeah.
So, being born and bred there, he was, pretty
adamant. Yeah, we're going to do that for sure. Hey, we're out of time, but this was terrific. Yellow Rose, a novel of the Texas Revolution. Carl R. Brush, thank you for coming on. You can pick it up on Amazon.
Okay, thank you very much.